Persona 3 Reload is just about here, and we've had the absolute pleasure to be playing this modern rendition of a timeless classic. Ahoy folks, and welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I am your host Tris, and I am joined by Maka and Riku, because the three of us have been playing Persona 3 Reload. So it's only fitting that we spend time actually talking about it. Now, of course, first, Maka, you did write our review, so without spoiling that too much, how would you loosely summarize your thoughts on the game?
I would say the two things I came away with was this is the best version of P3, and it's also incredibly faithful. One thing I was a little worried going into the game was, is this the P5ification of P3? Because there were certain things that were like, that's like very P5 more than P3. But no, like past a certain point, I was like, oh, these concerns are very, not unfounded, but they're like, no, they're gone. It is incredibly faithful. It's the best version. I don't know if I'd say it's definitive because there is still missing content, but it is absolutely the best version of the original P3.
Riku, what would you say?
I think Reload is a really good game. I think it's probably the best experience I had with Persona 3, considering that I didn't get far with the portable version of the game because there are some issues I had with it. And FVS also had its issues. And I think Reload does a good job of like bringing it all together from a gameplay perspective. And I really enjoyed it. I'm enjoying my time with it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, Maka, I completely resonate with the initial reactions of, I kind of see like the bit of the Persona 5 influence here. But it's really just that kind of passing thought early on. Like, this game really does a great job at keeping its own identity while also modernizing to accommodate fans that maybe have only played Persona 5 before this one. And
seriously.
Yeah, I was so worried about it keeping its own identity while doing that. But I think it does an excellent job with that. Even, like, visually. Like, it visually looks, like, distinct enough from Persona 5 and the visual themes that has going on, too.
Absolutely. I love the major focus on water, which was kind of there in the original because it's a port town. Yeah. But they really doubled down on it in so many different ways. It also kind of ties into the Sea of the Soul thing, which is a aspect of Persona lore. I really like how they remain faithful to that style, but they also kind of doubled down on it and made it stand out even more than the original P3. Yeah. Because when I went back to P3, FES, I don't know how to say it, just before this, I noticed that, like, wow, this game is blue. And that was kind of the main thing. This game is blue.
Yeah, I like how each Persona game has its own like color. Persona 3 is like way blue. It's insane. And also, Persona 5 has been released in 60 FPS, but just seeing Persona 3 this smooth is like really impressive. Something about it. It's just so nice. And the character models all look beautiful. It's a great looking game.
It really is. There was a moment I had within my first couple of hours in the game where I was kind of just exploring around the school. And I noticed how, like, detailed the reflections in the windows were. And I'm like, I'm not normally someone that gets up about graphics at all, but, like, I saw that and I actually was like, whoa, wait, this is really good.
I saw when I first booted the game up. On PC, when you boot it up, this is a weird thing. When you boot it up, it came on, I have two monitors, right monitor, left monitor. It came up on my left monitor, but I wanted it on my right monitor. So I kept struggling to get it to go over to my right monitor. But I noticed that you can turn the reflections off, and I was like, I don't want to do that. These look really good.
That's why I didn't even realize you could do that. No, why would you want to do that? I mean, I guess for performance reasons, but like, no, they look really good. Like visually, honestly, I'm impressed because Persona has that like very distinct, certain kind of anime art style to it, but it does a really good job of still being beautiful on top of that. And that's not just because, as we mentioned too, with like the water themes, the evolution of the kind of UI style that Persona 5 had that very much is still true here while keeping its own identity too. Like it is a very beautiful game in its own right. Now, Riku, you touched upon this a little bit of past experience with Persona 3 where you said you played a little bit of portable, played a little bit of FES, couldn't really get into either of them, or you kind of had problems with them, you couldn't quite finish it. So this is the furthest then you've gotten in any version.
Yeah, this is by far the furthest. Yeah. So My issues with Persona 3 on the PS2 FES was, everybody has said it, but the fact that you can't control your party members, that's like a big like turn off for me. Something about like issuing like general commands just isn't my kind of thing. If it's a turn-based game, I really want to be able to, choose each of my characters' actions.
Right.
I feel like I have more control over the party that way. And with Persona 3 Portable, they fixed that with Portable, but then also it's more of like a visual novel kind of thing, or more of like you move a cursor around, there's less exploration.
Yeah.
And that's not like a massive turnoff, but I also just wasn't super like compelled to play it when they released it on Switch and PlayStation 4. I thought I was going to, but I was like, I think I'll just wait and see what happens. Because at that time, there were rumors of there being a remake of Persona 3. And I was like, maybe I'll just wait for that and see what happens. Yeah.
No, yeah, I definitely get that. Like, the different styles that Persona 3 has had over the years, there's different reasons why people didn't like it. Like, a lot of the systems back in FES were, for better or worse, more archaic nowadays. And that's just kind of more a product of its time. Portable, definitely more so limitations of the hardware it was on and trying to make it work for that. I respect what they tried to do there, though I was surprised that was the version they brought over for, like, when they brought it to multi-platform. I imagine that's because of controlling the party members more than some other things. But
in terms of like the quality of life, it was the most up-to-date version.
I think that's
it's the one that people would be most likely to deal with. But yeah, in terms of presentation, it's definitely a preference thing. But in my opinion, it's the lesser of the two. It's absolutely a step back, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in a similar boat where I've tried a bit of Portable. I couldn't quite get into it because of the visual novelty aspects. I like the balance of the school life and the Persona life, I guess is the best way to put it. And I feel like with one of them being restricted to visual novel style, it doesn't quite feel like as good of a blend. So I couldn't quite get into that one as much. And then I never actually had a chance to play FES originally. So this is also like the furthest I've gotten into Persona 3. And like I had seen like the animated movies years ago. So like I know the overall plot and everything, but it just feels really special actually going through and experiencing it all this time. I believe, Maka, you have the most experience with Persona 3 out of all of us, though.
Yes. It's one of those things where I have tried multiple times all throughout the years to just get through. And it was the sort of thing where I get farther and farther every time. This is a game that I know a lot about, but it's something that I've never been able to just sit down and do a single playthrough all the way through. And at first it was because of the things like, not being able to control your party members. And then I kind of got to a point where I could handle that. And then it was like, the difficulty or whatever. And then I got used to that. But the main thing I could just never really get over was Tartarus. Tartarus was just, in the original, it's so bad. It is so bad. It is, my eyes glaze over and I couldn't handle it. Which is why it's so shocking in Reload that I actually like Tartarus in this. They actually like made it feel different between each one. There's still a little bit of repetition in there, but each block actually feels different.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that a bit. Sorry, Riku, go ahead.
No, yeah. Okay, so I was just gonna say, it's also for me it was also Tartarus as well as like sort of the pacing of the story, which we can talk about the story later on, or not too far into it, but yeah. Tartarus is just super repetitive, and Reload does a good job of like making it feel a bit more fresh by adding a few things here and there to do, and so that's why I didn't feel like it was as repetitive this time. I actually kind of liked it this time, and the structure is slightly different in different sections, so I'm really happy about it so far.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get into specifically. Like the way it restructures and the way it plays out in Reload. I actually think this is the most digestible Tartarus has ever been, and in this. And it kind of takes from for those that have only played Persona 5 before, kind of like how Mementos, when you would go down, that one was much bigger, but it kind of takes from that in terms of the kind of progression and how you go around and find things. And I actually like Tartarus better than I liked Mementos, because Mementos really was just long hallways of driving in the Morgana car, whereas here there is more that you're actively doing, and you have the fun little moments like, oh hey, one of your party members is actually going to run ahead and scout ahead, and then you have to kind of plan around that. Like, there's different things happening here that add more depth to it, which is great.
One thing kind of going off of the party members running ahead, one thing I'm really glad that this did is, I mentioned in the review, but there are a number of ideas that were introduced in the original P3. The original P3 was like this overhaul of what Persona was. It was like this Hail Mary, Atlas is going to go out of business, let's just do whatever. So there's a lot of ideas in there, and not all of them work. That's why you get certain things like not being able to control your party members and you know, all these little things like that. But a number of those ideas kind of got dropped when it came to P4, and then even more dropped when it came to P5.
Right.
But this revisits those ideas, like being able to send your party members ahead of you. Whereas in P3, the original P3 and all the other versions, you could manually do that. In this, it happens randomly, but the fact that it still happens is neat in its own right. It still allows them to explore on their own and, you know, fill out the map a little bit more, but you also get kind of, you know, lesser. You're incomplete. Your party's incomplete.
Yeah.
So you got to deal with that handicap. Then there are other things that, one thing I was really concerned wasn't going to come back, and I'm really glad did, was it was party members not being able to go out with you on certain nights.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the original P3, one idea was these people are not you. The reason why you couldn't control your party members directly originally is because they are not you. They are other people. And I like that idea, but the way they went about it, it's hit or miss. Mm-hmm. This is something that I always liked. That it still allows that idea of like, hey, these people are not you, but it feels less intrusive, and it also forces me to vary up my party more.
Yeah.
And like try out different people that I wouldn't have used originally. And I really like that idea, and I'm really glad that stuck around in this, or came back in this.
Mm-hmm. And it's also in a more digestible way. I keep saying that, but it's also done in a way here that's more accommodating for players not used to that kind of thing, where it's not like the original P3 where if certain characters spend too long in Tartarus, they're also exhausted for the next time it can't go. Now it's more so just if they have plans. So it's it's a slightly watered down version of it that makes it more appealing for players, because it's not, oh, now I'm being punished for playing too much. It's not like that. Now it's much more accessible to keep going if you want to, but just note, hey, sometimes you won't have a certain character or two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't find it too intrusive or anything like that. There was maybe like one time I really wanted to like check out a character like who I maybe got an outfit for on like one night, and then they just weren't available. But other than that, like, nah, it's fine. Yeah, they're busy. I'll just take somebody else. It made me because there are some characters that were under-leveled, because I have favorites that I just use all the time. And so on those days, I was like, oh, we'll just use this one, and I'll grind them up, and there you go. So I like it. I think it's a pretty cool mechanic.
I do really like, speaking of like the underleveled, I actually really like how there's a way they address that too. There's that like feature in Tartarus where if you use I think they're called the Twilight Fragments, this door can appear. And if you interact with the door, you'll get to kind of help boost certain party members. So yeah, the next time they enter battle, they'll jump up to your level. And that's a great like quality of life improvement for people that just can't handle grinding. But it's entirely optional. You don't have to enter that door and interact with it. You can look at it and say, no, I'm going to do the grind manually, and just walk away from it. And that's great.
No, I really liked that way of like keeping people up to date. I also just really like the Twilight Fragments. I think that's a really interesting idea. I will say I was a little disappointed when they're first introduced. It seemed like, oh, you find these out in the world, and this is supposed to give you a reason to actually want to run around and walk to your places, as opposed to just warping everywhere.
Right.
But as time kind of went on, they started to lessen, and I was like, I'm not even finding them anymore, so I'm just warping all over the place.
Yeah.
Most of my Twilight fragments came from Elizabeth, as opposed to finding them like I was supposed to.
Yeah, I think there's like a set number in the overworld, because I remember getting an achievement for like finding all of them in the city. I was like, oh, that's all there are there? And then getting a lot of them otherwise from Elizabeth. I know you can get them when exploring Tartarus, but I kind of feel like they're really rare drops from like the things that look like glue hands.
Yeah. There's there is a floor condition that shows up later on that allows you to get a lot more of them
Ooh.
on a single floor. But I've only ever had that happen twice, and one of them was the tutorial floor for that.
Oh. Okay, so not much then.
Even then, it's still rare.
Yeah.
I still don't find them.
Man.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can
I
also
actually
get 'em from-
forgot. I forgot that you could find them in the overworld, to be honest. Like, after, like, the first, like, week or so of looking at them, I was like, oh, yeah, I just went to Elizabeth every now and then, and she would just reward me with them. I was like, okay, great. I'll just do that instead. And she gave me a lot of them.
She does give a lot.
Yeah.
I also just remembered you can get them from cats that wander into Tartarus that you save.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
That
That's
I forgot
fantastic.
about that. Yeah, you can get them from cats.
That's so good. That's so good.
Yeah.
So we at this point we've kind of been talking a bit about like some of the new changes, some of the new things that are here, and some differences from the original. And I wanted to ask, because I'm pretty sure this is like a brand new thing that people have been talking about for a while. The Theurgies. Theurgies? I think it's how you pronounce it.
Theurgies?
Theurgy.
The specials.
Something like that.
The special
Yeah,
attacks that aren't all out attack.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what you guys think of them, because I think they're really interesting, and I really like how each character has a different condition for how to like fill those up and like activate them, because I think it really helps push them as their own characters. But I do feel like it's some of them are a little unbalanced and very situational to be able to get or activate in the first place.
I love them. I think that Mitsuru is probably my favorite. Mitsuru or like Akihiko. But I love that, yeah, they all have these really cool and like funny animations. It just adds a lot of personality, I think, to the battle system. And it's just so cool. It reminds me of like the Showtime attacks, sort of kind of like that. Yeah, that's the closest thing I could compare them to, except it's like individual. But overall, yeah, I think they're awesome, flashy, and I think it fits really, really well with Persona 3.
Mm-hmm. I like them a lot. I really like the like you said, having the different conditions per character. It not only it reinforces what their role is as a party member, but also like it kind of adds their own like personality. Where Yukari, you have to heal people with her, and that's how you actually get hers to fill up. Whereas Akihiko, you need to like bolster his. You have to like buff him in certain ways. So like use Tarukaja or something and buff him that way. Though I do agree that some of them felt really situational in terms of filling. Others filled quickly. Like Yukari filled all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas Akihiko, again, for a good while, it wasn't until recently that it actually started filling pretty regularly. So I definitely agree about that. I think there are definitely some tweaks that could be made to the system, but I do actually really like it. I also really like the animations. Those are really fun. Especially the main characters, Theurgies, where it's just the personas running around.
Yeah.
Anything that highlights personas or demons, whatever, anything that highlights them, I love it. I love those guys.
No, and they're so well thought out, some of them too. Like I mean, right now my favorite one of them really is like Jack Frost and the Black Lantern, like the Pumpkin Jack, like the two of them just having a little comedy routine. It's so good. It's so charming, and I think that's what makes
the one that
special.
jumped out to me the most.
No, I think in terms of like new stuff here, though, I think it's a great way to spotlight these characters. Because before, with Persona 5, it really was like their all-out attack and like the little like card they would get, and then also the showtimes. But as mentioned, those were pairs. I think what's special here is we still get the all-out attack with a special like with special like screen for it, but that's not like the big one. These are the big ones, and I think that just it makes the combat feel really good constantly.
I think I think you kind of touched on this earlier, one of you. The kind of the difference between Showtime attacks and this is Showtime attacks. They're all visually different, but ultimately they do the same thing.
Yeah,
and they appear randomly. As far as I can tell, they're just kind of random. They just kind of happen, and they don't actually have any differences between them. It's just what animation you get. And in that respect, I mean, it is kind of cool seeing all these different animations, but it's also like it kind of feels like a non-mechanic almost.
Right.
Whereas here, it actually feels like, oh, you can plan for these. You can plan for these. You can decide, do I want to use this one or do I want to use that one? They have different outcomes, and I really like that much better in terms of like, boss battles or just every every battle I come across. It feels so much more strategic in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would save my Theurgy for specific boss fights or whatever, things like that. But with Showtime, it was like, oh, it's time to Showtime. I'll just use it. And I was just
use it or lose it.
Yep.
Basically.
Yeah, and there's no harm in using it. But then I love that you can just plan for it with the Theurgy attack. It's so much better.
Yeah, it's great for strategy, and I think Persona 3 really excels at that too. So we talked a bit about different things you experienced throughout the game now, but I do want to ask: do you guys have any like particular from what we could talk about without like major spoilers? Are there any particular favorite moments you've experienced in the game, or perhaps if it's easier to dwindle down, a favorite like character moment or performance of a specific character? Since like most of the vocal cast is completely new, for example.
I'd say for me, I really like a number of the Link episodes. There are a couple of the Link episodes that are past the cutoff that I can't talk about, but those are some of my favorites. Whereas one from beforehand, there's one where it's Junpei and he's like, hey man, it's summer, let's go get a watermelon. And then you come back, it's like right after Ken joins you. And you come back to the dorm, you go up onto the rooftop, and Junpei drags Ken, and Koromaru just comes along because Koromaru's a dog. Best party member. He's always in my party no matter what. But he drags him along, and it's like, oh, we're going to use like my childhood bat that I don't really care about anymore to smash it. And it's like, oh, this thing is rotted. It's like it's going to break the second we use it. And then you kind of convince him, hey, let's not do that because Junpei wanted to give Ken a childhood memory, but this bat was Junpei's childhood memory. And it's like, hey, don't feel the need to sacrifice your memories to give someone else a memory. And I really liked that moment. I really liked it. I really liked the Link episodes. They didn't feel like, oh, this has to do with the story. It just felt like a bonus thing that really made these characters feel real. I like them a lot.
Yeah. I think at least at the top of my mind right now, my favorite moment right now is when Theurgy was like first introduced, and I believe it started with Yukari. It was like a really cool scene where she kind of got this like really big burst in emotion to like save the main character, and I thought that was a really well done scene, especially because it kind of like was all like part of the battle itself. I thought that was really cool.
No, absolutely. Like, I think both of those, honestly, because you have like fantastic character interactions, like multiple party member interactions that, unless it's story, in most of the games you don't usually get. And like the rather epic reveal of a new mechanic in the game that's not actually done through the main character for once. Like, if there's anything Persona 3 does right, and especially here in Reload, I think it treats its characters really, really well. And they feel alive. They feel like other characters that are here. You have so many RPGs where people feel like once a character joins the party and their story arc is over, they're not relevant anymore outside of being part of the group. Persona 5 even had that at times where once you finish the palace and the associated party member joined the Phantom Thieves and they got what they needed to by changing the heart, they kind of were just there at times, unless they tied into a very specific plot point that came up.
They
don't really have that here.
They would talk, but they'd stop developing as a character. Their arc is over.
Outside of their social link.
Yeah, unless you do their social link. That's one thing I like with P3 is that the characters develop in the story.
Yep.
Thus meaning if they had a social link, if the girls had a social link, they would develop a bit more there. But again, that's where the Link episodes come in because it allows for a lot of that additional characterization while not compromising on their character arc within the main plot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's why, like, I'm not decided yet, but P3's cast, man, they might be my favorite. I'm not gonna lie, I really love them. Yeah, and like the overall vibe of the story, that's also something that I like really enjoy. Obviously, like from the beginning part of the story, it's like really like dark and creepy. I don't know. It's like I didn't expect it to be as like the tone that it had. Like when you first go into Tartarus, it's like I don't know. It's really almost horror. Like it feels. It's really weird. I love it though.
Coming off of the successor Personas 4 and 5, it really is different to come back to, and I'm so glad so much of that that theme, that energy that they had originally, is here and redone because I think it comes across so well now. But in terms of the character performances and all, I just need to shout out the fact that I have never heard a Persona game so heavily voice acted, and it feels so good. Like, I was shocked at just how much voice acting there is here. Like, back in Persona 5, the start and end of a Confidant was voiced. I was so surprised to see, like, every rank up of a social link here is voiced. So many, like, beyond just story-based cutscenes, just cutscenes that just naturally happen as you progress get voiced. Even ones that don't feel like they have any, like, story relevance, they're just what's happening. That sometimes I get surprised when something isn't voiced at this point, because there's so much of it here in this game, and it's impressive, honestly, because we haven't had that before.
I've been screaming for years, like, at least dub the social links. If you're gonna like go out of your way to like dub so much of this game, I feel like the social links, which is not as important as the main story, but it's almost as important. It's the second most important thing. That should be dubbed also, and I'm so glad they finally did it. Because P3 social links are pretty simple, especially when you compare them to 4 and 5. But the voice acting adds so much to these characters, just purely in the performance. And I really gotta highlight the actors. They really added a lot to these characters, even though the script, for the most part, is basically the exact same.
Yeah, it really does come down to the performance for a lot of it. Like, one that really stands out to mind in terms of the social link specifically is Maiko, the little girl whose parents are getting a divorce. Oh my god, like, you feel like this poor child's emotions like every time she speaks, and I think it's done so well. That's probably one of the more depressing social links, to be honest, but it's the performance through it just conveyed so well. I also really love, not quite the same as the like the Link episodes, like you mentioned, because those are really good. But I love when you get to hang out with them in the lounge or like somewhere in the dorm, and those are also fully voiced.
Yeah.
Whether you're watching a movie together, or making tea with Mitsuru, or cooking with Akihiko, or doing a big group study session, all of these are voiced.
Watching a wolf documentary with Koromaru, even that's
exactly.
voiced.
Yeah.
No, like, it's wild just how much of it. Like, you could tell they wanted to voice as much as they could, and they do a great job with it. And it's those little moments that really sell that, like these characters are alive. They're not just other characters you run into in your adventure. They're part of your group, and they are also their own people. And this game conveys it so much better than any others have. I love it.
One thing is that I love about the voice acting is that, like I said, I've only played a little bit of Persona 3, but I think they sound like pretty much how I imagined they would sound. Like they sound like their character designs, if that makes sense. I think they did a great job of like adding like so much emotion and like personality to the characters, and it's fantastic. It's great.
No, I said this in the review, but I'll keep saying it. It really feels like these actors, they were able to put their own spin on the characters, but the voices still not only remain true to the character, but it also just remained true to the original performance, where it's like I listen to Mitsuru, and I hear it, and I'm like, well, one, Mitsuru sounds like almost a one-to-one voice match, like almost exactly the same. But I hear that, and I'm like, that is Mitsuru's voice. That's also not Terra Platt. It feels like it's doing its own thing, but it still feels appropriate.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
no, seriously, everyone did a fantastic job. I don't think there was a single weak link.
No, like, I absolutely agree. Like, I'm really loving this performance, especially since, like, I know past Persona games, the vocal performance is usually what people tend to criticize. People tend to get critical over, like, the direction for some of it, or like how the voice actors were directed to pronounce certain names, or how they handle certain situations because people feel the performance goes a little against what's happening on screen. I never really felt that at all with this game yet.
No.
Like, and that's a criticism I remember, like, being there for both versions of 5. Like, it's actually very refreshing that I haven't thought of that complaint at all with this game.
No, I always see people complain like, oh, I hate Morgana's voice, I hate Teddy's voice. No one hates Koromaru's voice. No one hates his voice. And if they do, I got something to say to them. But yeah, Koromaru supremacy.
Absolutely.
He's the best.
Absolutely. Yep. So good. Well, are there any other particular points about Persona 3 that either of you would like to talk on? Because I went through all my notes there. Want to give you guys a chance if they have anything.
I think that I'm not necessarily surprised, but I think I'm like happy that the battle system still feels really modern, despite not having things like negotiations or fighting persona designs or demons in SMT. I think it's really cool to see like it reminds me of P4. They use like the kind of older, weirder designs, but they're like kind of scaled up to look as good as like the rest of the characters, and I think that's pretty cool. Overall, yeah, the battle system is just as fun as I thought it would be, but Atlas is really good at that kind of thing, so I think there really shouldn't be any surprise at this point.
No, absolutely.
I think
it's a great battle system.
I think the two things I just kind of want to mention,
Yeah.
one of which didn't bother me too much, but I can totally see it bothering other people, is just the story pacing early on. It is very slow. The first 3 or so months, it kind of feels like you're just going through the motions until something happens on the full moon operations. And it's really not until the beach trip in July that it actually feels like, oh, things are actually happening now.
Yeah.
Separate from the full moon operations. But that's something that I could totally see people getting kind of turned off with. The other thing I just really wanted to highlight is the new character art, or the new lead character artist. Because it's not Soejima, as it has been with the original P3, 4, 5, and all the spin-offs. It's, I googled her name earlier. Let me pull it back up. Azusa Shimada. She did a great job. I do really like these faces a lot. I like them a lot. They're very expressive. It looks... At first, I was like, oh, this is not Soejima, because it still kind of gives off those vibes. But after playing with these faces for hours, I look at them, I'm like, this is good in its own right. It is going for a similar vibe, but this is still really good in its own right.
No, I do really like the character design, the art style. I didn't realize it was someone different, but it makes sense, and I think they do a fantastic job.
Like I said, it looks similar, but it's not exactly the same.
And with the character design, this is more like opinionated, but I what's his name? The Persona 3 protagonist, canon name, whatever. I think
Makoto Yuki.
Makoto Yuki.
Makoto Yuki. Yeah, I think he has my favorite design at this point too. Out of Joker and the ones I play, Joker and Yunarakami, he's got like such a cool design. I don't know. I love like the little headphone thing he's got going on. The blue, it's awesome. Great character design. So
2009 technology.
Yeah.
I kind of love those headphones though.
I forget occasionally that this game takes place in 2009, and for that time period, it was actually like 3 years in the future.
Yeah,
when it first came out.
2006.
So it's really 2006 technology. But no, that's something that occasionally pops up, and I'm like, oh yeah, this game is like, the setting is old. It's not supposed to be, but it is.
Yeah.
I was surprised that it just said 2009. I was expecting 20XX like Persona 5. I was like, oh, it really is just 2009. It's pretty cool.
I was wondering if in the remake, if they were going to update it to like, oh, it's not when it originally took place. Now it's like, in line with like current Persona stuff. But no, they kept it as the original time, which I think is good. I think is good.
A lot of people make comparisons for right and wrong reasons, but Neo: The World Ends With You, that shifted the dates of the original game up from like 2007 to like 2017.
Oh, wow, so like 10 years, yeah.
It's the sort of thing where it's like these two series are somewhat similar, so I wouldn't be surprised, even if they're not made by the same people, I wouldn't be surprised if they did that.
No, yeah, that's fair. I'm glad they didn't, though. And to the other thing you were saying earlier about the pacing, I definitely get what you mean, because if you compare it to some of the other Persona games, and even just other RPGs in general, it is a slow start, but contextually, I think it depends on how into the story you're getting, and then how into like the characters in this world. Because if you're like really if you're someone who plays these games and like you insert yourself into like this main character and like the way they're going about it in the world, the pacing kind of makes sense in that case contextually in the world of they're going off of what they know at that point. They're going off of their knowledge and how much they know and how kept in the dark they are for a lot of these things. Whereas you didn't quite have that with, let's use Persona 5 as the example, because everything with the metaverse kicks off. It's easy comparison because the metaverse kicks off so quick, and nobody really knows what's going on because no one's really experienced it before outside of like Morgana, who's the one kind of guiding you through. But that has more specific like deadlines and such because it's different dungeons each time. There's a plot arc tied to that dungeon happening at the same time, whereas the big plot arc here across all of P3, even from the beginning, is there's this mysterious thing happening. Can we try to figure it out? So it's grander while also scaled back, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
I think it kind of, I've been telling Riku this as we've been playing, but it's kind of the opposite of P5 in a sense, where P5 at times can feel very restrictive with its story, where it feels like you get locked into the story. You're not really allowed to play the game while story is happening.
Yeah.
You just have to sit there for a few hours while cutscenes play, and then eventually you get let back out. Whereas here, not a lot of story is happening, but you're allowed to play the entire time.
Yeah.
You're not really restricted outside of like 1 or 2 days when it's like, oh, there are exams or something.
Yeah.
Or a character's like, hey, let's just not go tonight. Something's going on. So it feels a lot more freeing in terms of gameplay. But it comes at the cost of the early story, I'd say.
Yeah. No, I definitely get that. It definitely, I think you're right. It's definitely that kind of hit or miss. It's not going to be for everybody, and some people are going to find those early hours a bit grueling. But that's not necessarily a fault of the game. It's just a matter of what someone enjoys out of the story and if they're going to enjoy that section or not. But once it picks up, it's like stellar all the way through, to be honest.
It goes. Just get to July beach trip there. The July beach trip, Yakushima. Get there, and the story basically just goes from there.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, I think that'll do it for our Persona 3 Reload discussion. But, of course, if you guys want more, make sure to check out our in-depth review of the game, because Maka did a fantastic job with that one.
Yes,
and
thank
otherwise, stay tuned to GameXplain for plenty more coverage on Persona 3 Reload. Otherwise, until next time, farewell, everybody.
Bye-bye.